Welcome to this edition of The Extraordinary Life with Jean Rule. I'm so privileged and excited and grateful that I have my old friend Crystal Briden here with me. Crystal and I met while living in Muskegon, Michigan together. We actually moved there the same year. Did we not, Crystal? 2005?
Yeah. 2005. That's correct.
And it's amazing. I think we almost moved out of Michigan at the same time as well. I in 2008 and you in 2009.
2009. So. I think our houses were probably for sale at the same time. So
yeah, they were.
As you can get.
I think the fond memory I have of your house is you lived kind of on the other side of this little hill. And when it would snow, it would be almost impossible for you to either get to your house or from your house.
Or to leave. Yes, exactly. No, it would be ice and snow. And then, you'd give up.
Well, we lived in Muskegon, Michigan, which if anyone really knows their Michigan geography, you would hold your hand up in the form of a mitten and you'd point to kind of the knuckle on your pinky, and that would be Muskegon.
Exactly. Yep. On Lake Michigan.
Oh, beautiful Lake Michigan. I think fondly of it. I haven't actually been back since 2009 when our house sold there. And I think of it. I miss it. It's amazing how many friends I cultivated while living in Muskegon, Michigan over those 3 years.
Sure. Absolutely. No, it was a good place. And I think for that season, for both of us, we were really blessed, especially through we met through church. We went to church together, Forest Park Covenant Church. That was a big blessing for me. I really enjoyed that church.
I did too. That was my first experience into the Covenant denomination.
Us too.
It helped me kind of broaden my understanding of Christianity. So I appreciate Pastor Russ and all. Yeah. They actually invited me to go on staff, and so I worked there for a little sliver of time, and I would oftentimes be a greeter at the door. Hopefully, I haven't got the courage up, but I'm gonna ask Kirsten Haglin, who ended up being Miss America 2008, to be on my program at some point. I'm hoping she'll do it. I was just there greeting one day, and she just walks in, and we saw each other in town a couple of times. I actually got the courage up to ask her if I could set her up on a blind date. So I hope she'll come on the program and
we can tell that story.
I know. How could you not want to tell the story of setting Miss America up on a blind date and having her laugh along with you on it? So anyway, let's get on to your story, Crystal, because you and your husband, Kelly, are just one of those exceptional families that I have always wanted to stay in touch with. I know we haven't really been able to hang out together all these years. You went in a different direction. We went out west, and you've been all over the world. So let's start, though, by talking about how you and Kelly met, because I just love this story, and I'm sure my listeners will appreciate it.
So Kelly's from the Bay Area of California originally, and he applied to family practice residencies in Michigan, and he eventually accepted a position at a family practice residency at Sparrow Hospital in Lansing. And I was a nurse there. And so I met him, actually. I was in a hospital gown on an exam table, and he did my pre-employment physical for the hospital. So, and that was in 1998. A while ago, when I was finishing up nursing school. It was my first nursing job. And I met him, and he had a cross on his lapel. Yeah, from then on, it was history. We had a mutual friend. And so I contacted the mutual friend. I knew he couldn't call me and say, "Hey, I thought you looked really good in the gown. Would you like to go out sometime?" From there on. So I had never known him. I don't think I'd ever dated anyone that I didn't have like a connection to somehow, or somebody knew somebody, and so, he was just totally out of left field, totally God.
I just love that. A match made in, I don't know, the examining room. All right. Well, tell us about your upbringing and Kelly's upbringing. I'm going to be putting your interview in our segment of adoption and foster care, although I think you cross over into all these topics that I want to share. So I couldn't figure out where to put you. We're going to stick you here. So we're going to talk a little bit about your desire to adopt and what that went like, but then we're going to go in other directions as well. So can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how that impacted your future decision, you and Kelly, to adopt?
Sure. So I was raised in Michigan, about a couple hours north of Detroit on the east side. I'm one of 4 children. So I was raised in a Methodist church. For Kelly, it's kind of a similar story, except he was raised in the Bay Area of California in a Presbyterian church. He really got into mission work when he was younger, and he would go on these mission trips in the summertime to India and Zambia and Papua New Guinea. He loved to travel. So when we met, we initially, I was also looking into doing medical mission work as a nurse. And we said, hey, we could really do this. Let's do medical mission work. And that was kind of our goal. So yeah, for me, growing up, I didn't know anyone that was adopted. If someone was adopted, it was usually within their own race. Whereas Kelly grew up and his parents were both teachers, and he has an older sister that was adopted and came into their home 6 days before his biological brother was born. So you can picture my mother-in-law is pregnant, greatly pregnant, and she receives her adopted daughter, Kenna, and then her son is born 6 days later. And then Kelly was born, and he is biological. And then my sister-in-law was adopted from Korea 2 years after Kelly was born. So for Kelly, growing up in the Bay Area, which is, hugely diverse, and then obviously having sisters that didn't look exactly like you, that was completely normal for him. So he was, of course, like, well, of course we're going to adopt. And I was like, okay, I love kids. I've always loved kids. And I thought, if God really wants us to do this, that we'll go ahead with it and kind of see where he leads, because there's multiple ways to do it.
Well, you started out with 3 of your own, right? 3 girls.
We have Grace, who is graduating this year, and then Faith, who's a junior. And then we were in the process of adopting a little girl in Sierra Leone. They had a really bad civil war, and I had read a lot about Sierra Leone through Focus on the Family. Used to have a physician magazine years ago, and it would go out to physicians. And they talked about how they would, the rebels were just amputating, I don't know a better term for it, with machetes, people's arms and legs. And they had all these orphans that needed prosthetics and needed homes and then needed prosthetics, And so I thought, wow, that's something I think I could really help with as a nurse if we adopted from there, and someone was needing a prosthetic or learning to walk or things like that. So that's where we started, but that fell through, like often does in international adoptions, but intercountry adoptions, and especially in Africa, it's just, they don't have the infrastructure to be able to kind of facilitate this or anything similar to that, foster care or anything like that. And then we looked to Liberia, which is where our son was born. And our oldest son, Luke, he was born in February of 2005. And so about the time we get to Muskegon then and we meet you, it's fall of 2005. And we finally get Luke. So his gotcha days in September. And so we brought him home. He was about 7 months and the teeniest 7-month-old I've ever seen in my life.
Yes, I remember. I remember him. One of the other interviews that I am doing in this series is the story of Terry, my friends Terry and Matt Reed. And they have just adopted 3 teen girls from Sierra Leone. So
really?
I'm sure you'll enjoy reading or listening to that podcast.
Yeah.
Their parents, all 3 of these teen girls, their parents had lost their lives in the Ebola crisis. And so that's what sent them to that orphanage and later on adopted by the Reed family. So you'll enjoy that. But anyway, can continue. Tell us more. I think
so. We brought Luke home. So then we had 3 kids. I think it's just interesting when obviously he's he's African American. So when you adopt outside of your race, I think initially it's people are looking, or you feel like people are looking, and then you just become really used to people looking. Mm-hmm. And so, and mostly it's people looking because they're curious and they're kind. Most people are very kind, I will say that. And people are just curious, right? I think it's become a lot more common now in the United States that you see interracial adoption and, of course, multiracial families. It's just so much. Even in 2005, it was slightly different. So anyway, everything went great with Luke. Luke did wonderful. We knew we wanted to adopt again because, we had prayed about it, and we felt God was saying, it would be a lot to be kind of in some ways your own island in a family. If you're the only person that's that color, it would be nice to have other people represented, I guess, if we could say it that way. And so then we tried to pursue adopting a brother, not a biological brother, but a son from Liberia again. While Liberia had shut down, they were going through, Liberia's had such a tough time, and it's actually the only country that we colonized America. And because we sent back freed slaves to Liberia, and they have our flag and everything. So it's very unique. They feel like they're our colony still. They look to us, and most people don't even know where it is in the world. But Liberia, through many different things, had just shut down to adoption. It stopped. And so mostly it's our American embassy usually that shuts it down because there's a lot of fraud and a lot of things going on. Maybe people are making really poor choices, and even selling children. It can be very scary in those vulnerable populations, right? And so then we looked to Uganda, and my husband had done some mission work there, and so we saw it kind of open up. It's kind of like these windows of time, like it opened up, and God really used it. And in that time, as we're looking into Uganda, I got pregnant with our third daughter, Hope. And so Hope, and then when we brought Tim home, who was born in Uganda, Kampala, Uganda, they're only 10 months apart. So all of our kids are super close in age because of adoption, which when I had 5 in car seats and snow boots was a little more challenging. Now they're all teenagers, and I'm in quarantine with them.
Great. Well, I have to add that what was going on in our world, we had left you in Michigan, moved out to Portland. I made friends with Darcy and Mark, and they had just adopted 2 from Liberia, and they had said that those were the last 2 adoptions being handled out of the country of Liberia. So it was kind of interesting to hear you say that wasn't an option, and here they had just adopted the last 2 that came out of. So you could have had them, beautiful boy and girl, sister, brother kind of thing. So anyway, you now had a family of 5, and I think
family of 7, but I know what you mean, 5,
right,
and then
5 kids, and then of course mom and dad, 7. And I think at one point you had thought about becoming the physician on like a mercy ship or something because you wanted to go into missions, correct?
We really wanted to do medical mission work. And we had felt like even from the beginning, like our courtship, I kind of alluded to it, that we wanted to do medical mission work. So we looked into going with an organization called Mercy Ships, which we love Mercy Ships. We love all the work that they've done. I mean, it's a big floating hospital ship basically. And they go into, I think one year they were in Madagascar, but primarily they're in West Africa, which are really underserved communities. And they're doing, all kinds of surgeries for people that, they just cannot get locally at all. And so, we thought, well, we'll go with them. And we went down to Tyler, Texas, where it's headquartered. And so we did not have Timmy yet, but we knew we had 4 because I was pregnant with Hope. They said, your family size is just too big. I mean, on this ship, you guys are going to go crazy. And we knew we wanted to adopt Tim. We knew Tim was God's dream for us. Let me put it that way. And so we knew there was going to be 5, and that would be 7. And they're saying, well, in the cabins, I mean, there's like 4 bunks for kids. And, you have one more kid, and it's this little area. And at the time, I just was so bummed. I remember thinking, like, why did God bring us here? And what are we doing? Here we are in Texas in August. And thinking, it's hot. And I just remember crying about it. And then we met with the physician's assistant the next day. And she said, I just really feel like God wants me to tell you that maybe you should look into the State Department. And I remember thinking, what is she talking about, the State Department? Like, what state? The state of Texas? The state of what? I mean, of course, I knew who the Secretary of State was as an American, but like the U.S. Department of State. And I remember thinking, I don't even know what that is. And she's telling us, well, family physicians and nurse practitioners, they send them all over the globe with their families. And it'd be an amazing experience. You would see places that are completely closed to Christian missionaries. You would have exposure to people that you would never see otherwise, So we thought about it. We prayed about it. I mean, as with anything in government, it takes a long time, right? And so Kelly applied, and we were just kind of hanging out in Muskegon and adding 2 children very quickly, because I gave birth to one. And then months later, Tim comes into our family. Then we got the call, you're going to go, he's going to be a regional medical officer with the U.S. Department of State. And we're going to send you to one of 5 countries. And these are the countries. And you come to Washington, D.C., and we'll take it from there. So
your first assignment was the Middle East.
It was the Middle East, Kuwait. Yeah, Kuwait City, Kuwait.
Cool. Well, that was 2009, 2010. It had already kind of caught the radar of all Americans because of the Gulf War and such. And so tell us what life was like in Kuwait.
So 2009, yeah. So we go into Kuwait in December of 2009. And I had 5 little kids, right? Tiny kids. I mean, my oldest is in 2nd grade. So it was just completely different. And I will say this, I've never been in another country where I could kind of feel the physical oppression a little bit. It just was really totally different. And yeah, it took me time. I mean, there are really times that I have a hard time remembering some of it because I think I blocked it out early on in the beginning because it was so, I came from a small town, middle America, where people always greet each other and say hi and think about their neighbors, into this big, huge city, and totally different. You're hearing a call to prayer 5, 6 times a day. I can't remember now. It's just totally different. And then the ladies are completely covered. Some are just covered in black. Some have their face veils like you'd see in Saudi Arabia. So it was just really different. And of course, you can find anything there because they're big shoppers. They have huge shopping malls, and kind of like you would picture Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and beautiful water you've ever seen. Yeah.
I have to say, though, comparing anything to the friendliness of people in Muskegon, Michigan would be, I was a New Yorker, and moving to Muskegon was a shock to my system because of the friendliness of people there. I remember our friend Lisa, who would, I'd be shopping with her or something, and we'd meet this perfect stranger in the parking lot, and she'd literally talk to them for like an hour. And I'm like, sure. Lisa, we need to go.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I think of myself as being filtered through I'm a New Yorker who was filtered through the Midwest and ended up on the West Coast in the Pacific Northwest. And we have people out here, we call them Northwest Nice. So it's a little bit different
nice.
version
like Minnesota
of
nice, but
right. Yes. But yeah, Muskegon, it's a lot of Dutch were settled there. And so the difference in culture from Norwegian, Dutch, everybody's Vander something in their last name, or Carlson, or
Vander, yeah.
So the contrast to the Middle Eastern culture was quite dramatic, huh?
Yes, very dramatic. I think it was traumatic for me initially. My husband, Kelly, so when we lived there, he would work in Baghdad, and he'd go in and fill in for the doctors that were at the embassy in Baghdad. And so initially, I arrive in Kuwait City. I don't have a car. I have 5 kids. I'm out in this neighborhood. I don't speak Arabic. I know nothing really about the culture. And he goes to Baghdad. And so I'm thinking, wow, what am I doing here? Like, I don't understand. So anyway, over time, I realize and come to the realization everywhere you live, you're supposed to be pouring into someone or something, right? God doesn't make mistakes. There's not like, oops, Crystal accidentally went to Kuwait City. And what is she going to do with her time, right?
It's interesting because, we've only really corresponded through, me seeing your Facebook posts. I think we've texted a few times. You were kind of in the Pacific Northwest at one point or coming through here thinking about it. And I was hoping to see you. And then I was in Florida recently and trying to get all of you. But so pretty much just Facebook posts, really. And I remember the post, right? It's got to be almost 12 to 15 years old. But I remember a post you did where you were almost befriending like the street sweeper.
That is correct. You did.
I know. I remember that post.
And
Tell us about.
I still pray for him, Abdullahim. And so what they would do in Kuwait and commonly in the Middle East countries there is so Kuwaitis don't work, like unless they have a government job and they may go there for a couple hours a day. The really rich ones do not. And then they hire frequently people from poor and underdeveloped Islamic countries. And a lot of them were from Bangladesh or Pakistan, Afghanistan. And so I befriended the street sweepers because they literally were like the low of the low there. Like they wouldn't even look at them. They'd throw things at them and they would be, out sweeping the streets. And it's, I don't know, 40 degrees Celsius. So I'd have to do the math, but super hot, right? And they don't have water. They don't have money. And another thing they would do is they would take their passports and hold them. So then they would not be able to leave the country. They're trapped. And in essence, it's modern day slavery, right? Mm-hmm. And they would tell them initially, in these countries, we're going to let you teach the Quran. Some of them were Islamic scholars in their countries, in Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, just other places, right? And so it's kind of the bait and switch. And then they get in there and they're trapped and they're treated like chattel, basically. I just really had such a heart for them. And we really befriended one. His name was Abdullahim. And I tried so hard to get him a Bible in his language. I still pray for him. I think about him all the time. And I would find him in our area because he kind of was working in our area of Kuwait City. And I'd bring him water. I'd bring him food. Like during Ramadan, they wouldn't let them eat or drink. And they didn't have food that they could always eat or drink like in the middle of the night. I know commonly in Ramadan, people will eat in the middle of the night when they break their fast. It was very eye-opening for me.
So that was your first assignment. I forget if we mentioned that these were 2-year assignments. So you were pretty much signing on to stay in one location for 2 years. And the State Department does that on purpose, correct?
Yeah. So it's like 2 or 3 years usually. Sometimes you can extend longer. They want people to move. They, of course, don't want you to become part of the local culture and economy so that you can kind of use that. And I think of it like they have nepotism rules, right? You can't work for, I couldn't work directly under my spouse. It just, so the appearance of, we're moving people, we're trying to keep people.
And I would imagine for your safety too.
Yes. And for your safety, absolutely. So you have these brief windows of time and that going into it, but that can be hard too. Because you have to be able to set up a house fast, understand things really quickly. Where do you get food? And if there's a language barrier, it just makes it harder. So
where was your next assignment?
So then we went to Bamako, Mali, which is Bamako's in West Africa. And if you look at the continent of Africa, Timbuktu, people have usually heard of Timbuktu, is in the north of Mali. Mali was just really neat. It was just we were so excited to be there. And quickly things kind of went sideways. It was like a 20-year democracy. And we had just kind of started getting settled. We moved in August of 2011. And then there was a coup. So there was a military coup. It was just the weirdest thing. And I'll just never forget it. It was almost like people were like, it was just an accidental coup. And that happens all the time in Africa. And I remember speaking to people at the embassy who were much more experienced with this. And they were like, oh, trust me, this is an easy coup. Like nothing about this has been hard. And thinking, how many coups do you experience in your life? You know, as an American, you just think the government's falling apart. There's been a coup. And anyway, so it was like a captain one day just decided, his name was Sanogo, I won't forget it, just to take over the radio station and the TV. And next thing you know, the military's following his command and they've overthrown the president and people are shooting and we can hear it in the streets. And we're telling our youngest daughter, it's probably fireworks. It sounds like automatic rounds, but we are just told you got to shelter in place. Do not leave your house. You should have enough food to last you 2 to 3 weeks in your house and water. And then it just becomes obvious to our government as we're watching everything, how it plays out, that they decide they're going to give us an authorized departure. And that means that you can leave then. The schools are not going to reopen and things like that. Life will not go back to normal quickly. And so we want to, they call it decrease our footprint. And we want to get people out to safety, go home to the US, and only essential people stay. And everyone's familiar now with the term essential workers. But
it sounds like a lot of those words are in our vocabulary lately with this COVID-19 thing. Without the bloodshed, I guess.
The shelter in place. Yeah, all this stuff. I think in some ways, this has really prepared me for this. I mean, my life up until this point has prepared me for this because I am able to hold in place, I guess. So
well, and at this point, you just have 5 kids in tow, and they're just hanging on.
Yeah, and I take off. So Kelly's essential. My husband, he has to stay behind in Bamako, and so I get on a plane from Bamako, and it's flying into Charles de Gaulle, Paris. And you're coming out of a country where things are just crazy. You're going into the airport, and there's people every couple feet with automatic weapons just standing there. And it just makes me nervous. So we get on the plane and we fly all the way to Casablanca and we land. And everything's in French. And I'm thinking, why didn't I pay attention more? And I should have been listening in my French class. I was trying to take French lessons. They're going really fast. And so someone starts interpreting it for me because I'm like, they've turned the lights on. We're landed somewhere I know we're not supposed to be. What's happening? Well, my kids sleep through it, but we have landed because they think there is a terrorist on the plane. And they are trying to get him off the plane and his bags. And so it takes us about 2 hours. We refuel because there was no fuel in Bamako even when we left. So I think we needed to refuel anyway, but it took longer because they had to get him off the plane. So then we get to Paris and we're behind. And again, I don't speak French. And I'm running through the airport with 5 kids. And I had a friend on the front of the plane. He told me, you need to get on this bus. If you've ever been to Charles de Gaulle, I think that the French people, that is truly, and I love France, don't get me wrong, that airport is like their haha at the world because it is a nightmare. And so, and with 5 kids in tow, it's even more of a nightmare. So we listened to my friend, got on the right bus, went to exactly the gate, just got there in time. And where are we going? Minnesota. And literally, it's all these sweet people sitting there being just Minnesota nice. And you're like, this is another world. People just don't know. Oh, and there's so little funny grandmas helping me try to get on the plane, So I'm like, oh, I'm going back home. It's going to be fine. It'll be fine. So basically what happened with that is we ended our time there because we could not be reunited as a family. We could not return. And so Kelly asked to be reassigned, and we got reassigned to Santiago, Chile in South America. And so we started that in the summer of 2012. And that was for 2 years. So 2014, we left there, and we just had a great time there. It reminds me of our American West Coast. I mean, very similar. The Pacific Ocean, mountains, surfing. We had a great time.
I think around that same time, we had befriended a family while living in Portland who were from Chile, and Lauren and their daughter were bestest friends. And I think when I talked to their mom, we actually had she had a friend who worked at the embassy there in Chile, and we were trying to connect the two of you to see if you knew each other or something.
So cool.
It's such a small world, I know. So you had a great time there, huh?
We had a great time. If anyone ever gets a chance to visit Chile, we had a housekeeper there. Her name was Pascuala, and I spoke to her only in Spanish. She did not speak English, and I still talk to her on WhatsApp. Well, at least monthly, if not every couple of weeks. And amazing people there. Just an amazingly interesting country. So beautiful. A lot more developed than, obviously, we were moving from Mali, which was quite, underdeveloped. Chile is really just amazing. They have a lot going on, a lot of outdoor adventure sports and stuff like that. So yeah, we had a great time. That was like a time of, I'm trying to think if anything crazy happened, because I don't think it did. So that was really nice.
You measure these years by the crazy. I get it.
Exactly. No, it was nice. We got to see Easter Island, which was fun. And yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, at this point, not only were you stationed in those countries, but you were able to travel to different places too. I recall seeing photos from all over the world. You were in Israel at one point, being baptized in the Jordan River, or kids, or just a whole litany of places and experiences.
Yeah, no, and I think that was really part of what we wanted our children to experience, is to really see the people, because I think it was Mark Twain that said, travel it's something about bigotry, but it prevents bigotry, basically. Mm-hmm. And I think it really does, because you see people, and you kind of understand where they are and how they live. Everyone values their family. You're never going to find someone that's like, oh, I don't really care about my family. Most people are motivated by that. And so, no, it was great. And Israel was I think that's my best trip of my whole life. So, yeah.
Yeah, our son Sam just got back right before the COVID-19 crisis hit, and he had to cut his visit short. So I'm sure it'll light a fire on him to go back sometime.
To go back. Yes, absolutely. That's great. Good.
Okay, so you leave Chile, and then what?
I just thought of one thing as I was talking about that. So in Chile, my mother and father-in-law, amazing people. I talked about them earlier, from the Bay Area in California. They would always come to visit, and they lived with us for long periods of time wherever we were. And in Chile, that was not an exception. They loved it there. It reminded them of Northern California. My father-in-law, in the spring of 2013, fell down and broke his hip and quickly passed away within a week.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And I say that because that was obviously a traumatic thing that I had kind of forgotten, but it was a real blessing when we look back, because he was with his son and his wife at the time in the hospital, and my husband was able to be with him. And if it happened in the States, that wouldn't have been the case. But he was an amazing man and did a lot of mission work. And so, yeah, that was quite traumatic. And it was an experience for us of how does this happen when you live abroad and someone passes away? And then how do you get them back? And how do you work with the embassy to get the right paperwork, even for transporting him after he's been cremated? Anyway, so I think God was just, teaching us through all those things to really obviously have grace for other people in those situations. So then we went to, after Chile, went to Ghana, across the capital of Ghana. And we were there for 3 years. So that felt like, we really had planted some roots at 3 years. And Ghana was a British colony. People there speak English. They speak like 75 other tribal languages too. So everyone has amazing brains. I'm always impressed how people can know these languages and have a working knowledge of, say, 15 languages in your head.
Crazy.
And I can't.
We're so spoiled as Americans, I know.
Yeah. So it was great. We had a great time. We had great friends there. Again, the history of Ghana is really amazing. The biggest takeaway for us was going to see like the quote unquote slave castles. And so we got to see where a bulk of the slaves that ended up in North America came through these castles, they called them. And they were big castles that the Europeans had kind of built as forts on the coast. And then they had these big basements where the slaves would come in and they'd be there for a period of time in horrific conditions. And then they would go on across the Atlantic.
Did you bring the boys with you to?
Yes.
That?
No, absolutely. And I think we saw it many times and with multiple visitors that came to visit. And it was always a hard thing to see. I think it's just really difficult, right? Because I think you realize so many things that when you're able to think of it from just other people's perspective, I think, in life, and you realize here they were just forced to leave everything, right? And, do this or be killed. And the conditions were just absolutely horrific. So it was always an exhausting day, basically, after you would see that. I never felt like when you're a tourist in certain countries, it's like, oh, this is nice to see these old churches or different things. That was always really draining. And
it's like going to visit Auschwitz or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep. And so, but it was good. And I think the Ghanaian people have really embraced people returning. They have one of the largest diasporas of people like returning to West Africa from the United States.
Cool.
And it was a neat country, quite stable. Yeah, I still talk to people that I worked with there that are Ghanaian. And I think one thing about people in other countries that they seem to do really well is they will reach out to you always. Major events happen like, COVID-19 or these, and they always are saying, we're praying for you. How are you doing? And I think that's just a good reminder for all of us, right? Is to stay connected. Those relationships are important. So
the global community.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep.
So you find your way back to the U.S. Was that your next assignment where you were stationed in Florida?
Yes. So we went to Broward County, Florida, and Kelly was in Fort Lauderdale. He worked in Fort Lauderdale. There's a federal office building there. He's a regional medical officer. So when he works at the embassy, he cares for the embassy community, any federal sending agency that would send someone to an embassy, whether it's DOD or the Department of State or FDA or DEA, all those agencies would send people there. He would be their doctor at the post and he'd have a health unit. Well, when we moved into Florida, it was different in that he was regional and he would travel to the Caribbean. So he was like covering a lot of the Caribbean islands, Barbados, and I can't remember all of them now. But Barbados was my favorite because I got to travel there.
Well, and I wish he was with us to interview because I'm sure he could tell some different stories and add flavor and color to this episode. He's in Pakistan right now, if we fast forward just temporarily.
Yes.
And he's there not by choice, I think, correct? Just got stranded there or?
Trapped there now. We were supposed to go to Italy over spring break, meet him in Italy for spring break. So like everyone else's plans, that kind of was sidelined. So yeah, he and
you're in Michigan right now, correct?
Yes,
you had bought a small lake house just to be able to retreat back to.
So we're near Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we have a house here. And then we also have a cottage in the county too. So we're living in a house now that I think we'll just keep here for our children to go to Western Michigan University if they want to, which is in town. I mean, if they don't, they can go where they want. But we just thought this is kind of a home base because we won't be here. You know, it's like your parents say, hey, you can come and live in our house, but we won't even be here.
Right.
So,
well, that's a kid's delight. I mean, what are you kidding me? Okay, so take us back to Florida because I know there was a situation that you experienced there that we'd like to talk about.
We moved into Florida immediately in July of 2017. My first experience with hurricane, and it's Hurricane Irma. And I laugh so hard now about if you've ever looked at hurricane predictors and the cone of uncertainty or the cone of certainty, and you're like, all these spaghetti models of these lines, and you're like, that could go anywhere. And it literally could go anywhere, right? And obviously, as it gets closer, you can kind of see better. But Kelly and I decided that it was best if I just took the kids. You know, we knew most likely everyone was going to be fine, but why don't I just take the kids and go north and find somewhere to hang out? Because it's going to be weeks of probably, you know, bigger problems with some flooding and the internet being out and school not in session. So I took off and started driving, and we couldn't find a hotel till we got to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which is a couple-day drive. We had a hotel in Jacksonville the first night. Then after that, we stumbled upon some kind of sketchy place somewhere, but there was just everyone was from the coast, were just kind of flooding in. And that was our welcome to Florida. And I thought, well, we've kind of got through, you know, some of the stressors of moving and hopefully, you know, now this is going to calm down. Well, it didn't calm down. And so for us, then we had two daughters that were attending Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, which is in northern Broward County. And that's where on February 14th of 2018, it was the largest school shooting in the U.S. to date. And it was just, I couldn't even believe what was happening. So that was, it was just overwhelming. And I think having lived abroad and in multiple stressful situations and different things where you feel like I'm out of control, this was the one that was probably the scariest. And that was in my own home country.
I know, how ironic. You go to all these foreign countries thinking that you're putting yourself at risk, and it's on American soil that the most traumatic. I recall seeing your posts that week that the girls were experiencing this faith and Grace, I believe, right?
Yes.
One, was it Grace, was actually in one of the classrooms. It must have not been the first couple of classrooms the shooter went into, because the teacher, I believe, had time to lock the door and get the kids under the desk or such, but wasn't the shooter banging on her door of her classroom?
And they could hear things. The scariest part for me was, I mean, it's, the whole thing is scary, but you're trying to figure out, how can I help? How do I get to them? What is happening initially? And I think Faith she was a sophomore at the time, and she ended up outside with a teacher. She was running to Walmart, which was really close. Like, if you can see it on a map, the school sits a certain way, and then there's water, kind of a canal area, and then there's Walmart. So she was running with a group of kids. And I didn't know this until later. And I remember thinking at the time, that was the smartest thing to do. Like, you're running and you got out of there. And so she made it to Walmart. She calls me at like 2:51 p.m. And later on, as they work up the timeline, you can see that as she's calling me with the security guard's phone, because her phone's dead, the shooter's right there buying a soda at Subway. So he's in Subway. And Subway, you know, if you've gone into Walmart, Subway's right next to the entrance where Faith is at. So, of course, you know, everyone's like, well, he dropped his guns. Well, we no one knew who he was at the time. You didn't know, right? So I went to pick up Faith, and I remember being in the parking lot and thinking, I don't know who this is, and I don't know what's happening. I need to leave the parking lot, because then I saw this huge team of like SWAT people and FBI, and they're following a path through the parking lot. And I'm thinking, he could be in the parking lot, or she, or who. I don't even know what's happening. I can't sit here. So we didn't know where Grace was at the time. We knew she was still kind of, at this point, locked away. We hadn't been able to get to her yet, because you can imagine it's just chaos. And so I took Faith home, and then finally we got Grace later that night, and she had stayed in her classroom for a long time. And then they kind of told them, walk that way, just walk that way down the street and you'll find people down there. And I just remember getting to her, and there was like TV cameras everywhere.
We were watching.
Yeah.
The world was watching you.
Right. And it's very intrusive. You just feel very much like, I just need to have a minute to hug her and not be like, oh. And so it was just really difficult. But I think I am amazed at both of our daughters, our two oldest, their resilience and how they have come through it. And I just think what they want to do with their lives, and how this for them has become a part of their story, and it will always be that, but it's not their whole story. And so I think sometimes people can get really caught up in that. And that's not to lessen the trauma or the fear or any of that. I mean, I totally believe that you have to validate that, and you have to live in those places, but you can't let it stop you. Right. And I think God does not want us to be afraid. And so in spite of all that, then my husband, after, we've kind of healed from that, then my husband says, well, I think I need to go do an unaccompanied tour. And for us in the State Department, we have some unaccompanied tours. That means your family can't go unless you have like an adult family member. Like I could go with him to Pakistan if I, am over the age of 18 and his spouse, right? So I could go, but the kids can't go. So obviously we were going to have one more year in the States before we would go out again as a family. And I couldn't stay in Florida after that. It was just too, it was just done. And we had a good time in Florida. Our kids all learned to scuba dive with their dad. I mean, they're total adventurers, and they loved Florida. Mostly the people there, like we always do. You always take the people with you, right? And, but yeah, it was just time to be done. And now, in hindsight, I see why I needed to be here. And so I feel like what God has been teaching me throughout my whole life, but especially in these last 10 years with the State Department, is you only have one day at a time. And so you can only do that one day, right? And so I think Americans, me included, sometimes want to focus on, this is our long-term goal. This is what we're going to do in 3 years. This is what we're going to do. And you really see people in other situations where they have to rely on God daily, like people are having to do now during COVID-19. Their faith is strengthened because of it. And I think, I don't know, I guess I just feel like that's really what God has taught me, is one day at a time, and that God wants you outside of your comfort zone. And that's when he can really work with you. If you're only willing to do things that you're comfortable with, I might not leave my room. I'm like an introverted extrovert. So yeah.
I've heard some people are actually wearing their masks inside their house. I think my brother, and he lives in the Philippines. They're all self-isolating in their bedrooms.
Yeah. I get it.
It's a little crazy, but I was sad to hear, following that Marjorie Douglas shooting, that there were several teens who have taken their life afterwards. Yes. Survivor guilt, or maybe what you were saying, where you can't just dwell on those sadnesses, or else they just chew you up. And
it is hard. I think there's a balance, and I think we're even seeing that in psychology and psychiatry, and some of it I think came out of this. is that some people really need to talk and they need to process with talk therapy. And I think it's amazing. I myself have had talk therapy for years, and it's a huge benefit. But I think some people also need to just get on with living. And you can say, well, maybe you're glossing things over, or sometimes that's just how people process. When something has scabbed over, to try to dig at it again, it can be really hard for people. And so I think there was a ton of survivor guilt. I mean, I felt it for myself as a parent, because you feel like you're so thankful that your children are okay and that they've survived. But then you constantly carry those people and you think their children are not okay. And, everything failed them. And so had it been a different day for me, that building that he was in and massacred all those people, the next day, my daughters would have been in that building. And the day before, my daughters were in that building. So I would have a totally different story. I think it's humbling, right? Because it's just such a close brush with something that you can't control, right?
It sounded like, was it Grace that decided to do something about it, be active in processing it by creating these little charm bracelets?
Yeah, she did that. And then, and it really took off, and she was able to kind of bless people, sadly, that were in school shootings that followed that. Also, she trained our dog. We have a Cairn Terrier. Duncan is his name, to be a therapy dog. So when we were in Florida, she would go with a friend of hers, and they would go to like nursing homes, libraries where children read to the dogs. Yeah, I really have a different perspective on that. Just pet therapy in general, but especially dogs. They really were such a help at that school after everything happened, because kids could just go sit with the dogs. And sometimes you just need to sit there and just know, either talk to something or someone that's not going to judge you. And so, yeah, that was an amazing blessing, the dogs and the therapists that would bring them in. So
and it sounds like Grace is pursuing some sort of healthcare field. So continuing on, finding a way to process tragedy like that, maybe in a helpful way.
Exactly. No, she definitely wants to be a nurse and a nurse practitioner. I think she, we'll see what she does, but I think she would like to travel the world too. I think all our kids have that bug now, because we have ruined them or made them better.
Time will tell.
Yes.
If you get blamed for it.
Yeah, right.
Do you have a favorite country or continent? It sounds like you have good and bad stories with a love affair with everything. Huh?
Yeah, and I think it's all different, but I think it's always the people, right, that you love the most. I mean, I love the places, like our house in Chile. It was so beautiful. I loved it there. It was great. But then we had amazing lifelong friends that we made in Ghana, because the country was not so beautiful, and you kind of came together as a group, and helped each other out. Different struggles, for us, when you're living abroad, you're kind of doing what everyone is doing now during COVID-19, which is you got to find toilet paper, and you got to find, what are we going to have to eat? Where are we getting our meat from? All these things that I think this has kind of forced Americans to look at their supply chain differently. That's what I've been doing for years, because literally when we go abroad, I would have basically a room in the house that's a pantry, because if we have to shelter in place for 3 weeks, we have to have supplies, right? So anyway, I just think all the countries were my favorite, but it's always the people, right? Those people never leave you. Like you're finding with this podcast, people never leave you, and they are eternal. And
I know. Well, that's exactly part of my impetus with this, is that we've experienced a lot. I've been to India and China and England, Mexico, Canada. I guess those would be the other countries I've been to. And I've been successful. Dave and I, his career, he's spent 15 years as college president, and just had some amazing experiences. But it's the people, and so I really look forward to going back and reconnecting. And this is, I think it was probably 15 years since we had talked, and yet it feels like old times, right?
I
like
know.
We're right back in your living room, and the kids are.
I'm already thinking
playing with their
we're
toys.
going to Zimbabwe next, and I'm thinking I got to make sure the rules are going to come visit.
We'll figure that out. How is your life choices, adoption or working at the State Department? How has it really impacted the younger kids? And we've talked about the older ones and some of their experiences, but how do you see it affecting even little ones if people were to want to travel and do something like you've done? Do you see it as a positive?
Yes, I do see it as a positive. And I think you're going to have people that have come out of it that were raised in this, like missionary kids and people who are military kids, diplomat kids, that are going to say, oh, I didn't like it. But I think for the vast majority of them, it makes them really flexible and patient because they're working in systems and having to deal with things that most Americans could never understand the process of, and the frustrations that would go along with trying to learn a whole new country quickly, right? And so because of that, they're super patient. And I'll never forget being in Chile, and we ordered hamburgers, and we're near Patagonia. We're way down south. And we're always telling our kids, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Whatever comes out, we're going to eat it, because we've tried to order in Spanish. Your dad and I are doing the best we can. And the hamburgers come out, hamburguesa con I can't think of cheese now, queso. And no bun. There's no bun. They're just a meat patty with cheese on top. And so, but when you're hungry, you eat, right? And then, you move on and you try to be positive. And so I think that's just one example where it's like, you realize, I guess, what's important. So is that because you failed to use the word bun in your description, or that's just how they eat hamburgers? No bread. We did not say that. So I don't know if that was just how they did it in the south of Chile. They didn't have buns with a meat patty, but we still laugh about it. And these things, I mean, we took a 6-week road trip all through South America. And at one point, we're surviving as we're going through the jungles of Brazil and Bolivia. We're surviving on Slim Jims. Our kids won't touch a Slim Jim. So if you ever want to go on a road trip with us and bring food you don't want your kids to eat in the future, boom, you got it.
They're all for me. I love Slim Jims. Well, in wrapping this up, I'm going to ask everyone questions like this. So hopefully, your statement about not knowing what to plan in the future is the case. But if you were to bury this interview in a time capsule and then 5, 10, 20 years from now, dig it up, what would you say to your future self, or your husband, or your kids, or America? What do you want to say looking back?
I think I just come back to like one day at a time. But there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about consider the birds, or consider the ravens of the air, and how you can't worry. You're not going to add another day. There's not going to be another minute added to your life if you spend it worrying, right? And so some of it is lose your control and your micromanagement and just let life happen and kind of see where God leads you. Because there are people that you will be exposed to, I think, like you were really going to do on this podcast, that will change your life, and amazing people that you will meet, and amazing situations you'll be placed in. And if you just let God direct it. So one day at a time, and just truly be thankful for every day, because we just don't know. Right. And we're just, creation is so amazing, and God is so good to bring friends together, and, people with common interests. And so that's what I would say.
Cool. Yeah, gratitude is so huge, isn't it? That alone will get you through every day if you can just be grateful for what you have.
Yep. I'm so grateful that you reached out, and I'm just grateful you're doing. I'm so excited. I love podcasts. I can't wait to listen to it.
Oh, these are going to be awesome. I have some really great friends. Since we left, right, each other in 2008, 2009, I've amassed just an army of friends that have really amazing stories, and I'm so excited to be able to go back and talk to them and share their stories and how they've impacted me and changed me. I'm a new person as a result of all these interactions, and so I'm not the same person you knew back in 2009 because of them. And so it'll be fun to share them all with you. I felt kind of selfish, just keeping them all to myself. And I don't always get relationships right. When I was a kid growing up, I was one of 10 kids, and we didn't really need friends because you had all these built-in siblings. And so I never really successfully mastered the art of having friends. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized, wow, this is something that's really missing in my life. And I went about trying to, make friends, and it's hit or miss. You have to learn sometimes how to be a good friend. And, making a difference in people's lives. In one of our interviews here, I talk about volunteering a lot, because volunteering is a way that you make friends. You have these shared experiences with people in different settings that are very altruistic and in your motives. And that has afforded me a lot of these friends as well. And I look forward to sharing them.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait.
All right, Crystal. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. You have 5 kids somewhere in the house doing something.
Well, thank you. Yeah, less than busy, though. I'm just enjoying, like everyone else, time at home.
Well, I hope to see you in person one of these days, whether in Michigan or in one of these countries, maybe Zimbabwe. Huh?
You need a safari. Fun. You look like you need a safari. Great.
That would be awesome. I look forward to it. All right. Well, God bless you, sister. And we look forward to hearing good things about your future and your kids, too.
Okay.
Give Kelly our best.
I will do. Thank you, Jean.
All right.